Hey ladies, Justin here. So, I had the idea of doing this recording for you because I want to share with you something I talk about in the first module of our Hashimoto's program, Thyroid Revive. And I'm just going to roll through the particular slide that I'm going to address here. And I want to talk about this one here, thyroid regulation and metabolism, because this is a really, really important aspect of Hashimoto's that you really want to understand, because a lot of women I talk to are experiencing a lot of symptoms and they don't understand why nothing's improving despite changing their diet and exercising, taking medications, supplements, detoxing, and all that stuff. So this is pulled from a paper that looks at thyroid regulation and metabolism and really illustrates how everything in the body is impacted by the thyroid. So if the thyroid is not working properly, as is the case with Hashimoto's, well, there's going to be some severe downstream effects. So I really wanted to kind of go through each of these different categories: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. So I know there's a lot of scientific jargon here, so you can just kind of ignore that. But hopefully it makes some sense. But I want to go through this so you really understand why all these symptoms are happening, so that you can also see, like, well, the thyroid is really the master regulator, and I have to get my thyroid to work properly with lifestyle management, not just thyroid replacement medications, in order for all these symptoms to resolve. So here's what I mean by that. So if we look at the first category here, A, in the top left region, it shows a little red abbreviation. So these little red abbreviations are the hypothalamus. They are part of the hypothalamic pathway. So the hypothalamus, as you know, is the first place where metabolism begins. Hypothalamus releases thyrotropin releasing hormone, which stimulates the pituitary to release TSH, as you know. And the pituitary releases TSH that stimulates the thyroid gland to release T4 and T3 production, right? Pretty basic stuff. So these different red initial abbreviations represent the hypothalamus. There are different parts of the hypothalamus that work to regulate different parts of the body. So PBN is the first one in this context. And so they are influenced by T4 and T3, okay, that are circulating in the blood. So here T3 activates the pathway that stimulates a number of things. In this one example, it actually, for one thing, stimulates the liver to produce a hormone called albumin, which is important for osmotic pressure in the blood. We need that. And when it's not activated by T3, because T3 levels are low, then there's not enough albumin to be made, and that can cause swelling in the legs, in the arms, in the face. So maybe you're experiencing some of that. Well, that's why. So low thyroid, it's all about what happens when you have low thyroid function in the blood. You might be thinking, well, I take thyroid replacement and so my levels are normal, but it does not mean it's affecting and getting to the cell. That's a different discussion, but be aware that blood levels do not reflect what is actually getting absorbed into the cell and regulating metabolism. So because that's not happening, there's no feedback loop to the brain to say, hey, we have enough thyroid hormone in the blood, you can stop sending the signal down to the body. So basically low levels of T4 and T3 basically disallow for this pathway to happen. So what it ends up doing is it causes a decrease in blood pressure, as you see BP here, and in heart rate, HR. So that's why people with hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, have a low heart rate, low blood pressure, low body temperature, maybe. Okay, and that's why they have cold hands and feet as well. So this is just one aspect of the brain that regulates that part of the body. So low thyroid hormone does that. Now, if we go to section B, this is about leptin. So leptin is a hormone made from body fat, which controls appetite and energy. So when it is released from fat cells, it activates this pathway here, And basically, what it does is it stimulates the release of TRH, thyroid releasing hormone, which then activates TSH, and that subsequently releases T3 and T4. So circulating T4 and T3 in the blood will then impact and tell that whole release of TRH to shut down if there are healthy levels. So having low body fat, for example, would result in a slowing of this metabolic rate because of this pathway. And high body fat levels and high leptin that would come out of that would encourage more thyroid hormone to be released. Pretty simple, okay? That's how that's why people who do competitions or chronic dieting, they're very low body fat, or you maybe get to a really low state and you suddenly have these sort of hypothyroid symptoms. That's because of the lack of leptin that's available. All right. So metabolic rate slowdown. Now, the section C is this is what's going to be really important or bring your attention. This is what's going to, I think, draw your attention because it's related to body fat. So T3 increases fatty acid synthesis, which goes on to basically stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. Right, T3 will stimulate adrenaline, noradrenaline, these important neurotransmitters and hormones that go on to influence. You'll see down here in section B, BAT, which stands for brown adipose tissue. So there's brown and there's white adipose tissue, two different types of fat. Brown adipose tissue is more concerned with thermogenesis and body heat. So you need T3 to stimulate adrenaline and these catecholamines to stimulate brown adipose tissue, which goes on to release heat. Okay, that's how you get body heat. That's why people will feel cold, because they're not activating this pathway. And if you look at section E here, this is really concerned with body weight. So T3 activates the sympathetic nervous system again, the catecholamines, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and they then go on to activate the release of body fat, fatty acid release, aka burning body fat. But that pathway isn't activated because weight loss doesn't happen. So you can see right then and there how eating less and exercising more and even taking meds aren't helping for a lot of people. And I see this all the time, and maybe you're struggling with struggling with weight loss and continuing to gain weight. Well, if your T3 isn't working, it's not activating the cells, and there aren't healthy levels, then it's going to interfere with this pathway, and you're not going to be able to burn fat. Okay. Now, section F here is related to the liver, and here's what I'll say about this. So the T3 is involved in fatty acid metabolism, period, right? Burning fat and storing fat. But what it also does is help with converting cholesterol into bile acids, and that's important for metabolizing or assimilating dietary fat. In hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's, this conversion doesn't happen for a lot of people. And this is why people deal with liver issues and they don't realize they're dealing with that. And they're accumulating fat in the liver, and it can turn into, if your TSH is in upper normal range, that can be a concern because that's associated with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and greater levels of TSH are correlated with extensive hepatitis, or basically, I would say it's more inflammatory fatty liver. That's not a good thing. So you can't convert cholesterol to bile acid. So cholesterol ends up being high, right? Which is why your LDL levels might be off track. It's also why people end up with gallstones, because gallstones are because of cholesterol building up in the body, and you don't make bile. So high cholesterol, gallstone issues, fat malabsorption issues, SIBO problems, small intestinal bacterial growth issues, because you need bile to prevent that from happening. It's a lot of things. This is why the liver, if it gets impaired like this, has an influence on the gut, because the liver influences the gut and the gut influences the liver. So already you can see how this is more than a thyroid issue. right? Your thyroid is getting attacked by antibodies and the immune system and the T cells, but because of that, there's a huge downstream effect. And this is what this entire illustration is showing. Now, going to section G, this is about energy production and muscle, a skeletal muscle system. So T3 is needed to activate muscle fibers and induce contractions. Basically, it's just making ATP, it's making energy in the muscle so that you can make a muscle contraction and movement. This is why people who are dealing with Hashimoto's have poor muscular endurance, they're fatigued all the time, not just neurologically, but like physically. They can't move or do a lot, like can't go for a walk, can't exercise very hard, they're completely drained because they're making ATP, all because of a lack of T3. All right, so that's how that affects your ability to exercise. And lastly, section H, this is a matter of blood sugar issues. So a lot of times I find on labs with clients who are dealing with insulin resistance or hypoglycemia or both at the same time. So T3 is important because it helps with making maturing beta cells in the pancreas, which are responsible for producing insulin. You may have heard of Addison's disease. Well, Addison's disease is an autoimmune disease that damages the part of the adrenals to make insulin. Okay, so and cortisol. So like that's another secondary autoimmune disease that can happen. I've found unrelated to this phenomenon here, this mechanism that can happen with Hashimoto's. So people end up with stage 1 or early silent autoimmunity to other parts of their body. Anyway, just a side note there, but the beta cells are responsible for making insulin. So insulin is activated by T3 essentially. And so that's why many people with thyroid issues have blood sugar dysregulation and insulin resistance. So if T3 is low, not getting to the cells and being active and effective on the tissue, there is oftentimes a delayed insulin release. So that's why you can feel fatigued after a meal. If you get really tired after you eat, that's a sign of insulin resistance usually. And it may not show up in a lab, and that's why it's confusing. People say, I have normal fasting insulin, fasting glucose is fine. Yeah, maybe not. Different parts of the body can be resistant to insulin. You know, the muscles usually are one. The liver is another. It can be fat tissue eventually, but not always. But nonetheless, there's a delay in insulin release. So if there's a delay, that's blood sugar is hanging out in your bloodstream, and it's not going anywhere. And you're not getting the energy into your cells. That's why you're dealing with fatigue. So that's one of the reasons why insulin kind of secretion is impaired and why blood sugar issues can be kind of present with your Hashimoto's. So this is pretty much the entire picture here. You're affecting blood sugar and insulin issues and muscle and the liver health and bile acids and cholesterol, and also affecting your ability to burn fat and create heat in the body, thermogenesis, and obviously blood pressure and heart rate. And then, of course, this all fits into the issues with hair loss and maybe as well, and brain fog, and that's all part of this as well. So hopefully that makes sense, but you can see how really convoluted this all is and how it's one big web, right? And that's the whole point I'm trying to make here with this, is that Hashimoto's is more than a thyroid antibody problem, an autoimmune disease. Yeah, we got to tackle that, and that's what we teach at Thyroid Revive, how to deal with that from a lifestyle management standpoint, and to give you the tools to maintain that for the rest of your life. But there are secondary downstream effects and consequences of low functioning thyroid. Functioning thyroid, and that's what all this is about. So when people ask me, well, how do you resolve the weight gain? How do you get more energy? How do you deal with brain fog? How do I stop my hair loss? You deal with the autoimmune disease. You deal with the thyroid, right? You have to deal with all the consequences of the new issues that are coming up, and maybe that involves taking some medication. Maybe it involves taking some supplements or whatever to help you get through the process of this. But it all comes back to the general idea, concept of deal with the imbalanced immune system. Okay, so that's why I'm saying like you can focus on diet and supplements and meds and do those things. They are helpful, but if you don't actually address the balanced immune system, you're going to continue to have these issues. And that's why I hear women all the time tell me they have issues and they don't get better, or they're taking like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's because of this. So that's why Thyroid Revive is really in depth, and it really teaches you all the specific things about Hashimoto's that you could be dealing with, but you're going to learn and you're going to figure out for yourself with my guidance to help you navigate through that and give you a very specific individualized protocol to address your specific triggers and issues and how to get back on track naturally. The AIP workshop that I run is centered around balancing your immune system so that this phenomenon stops. Okay, it's not an overnight fix, of course, but it's a really good first place to begin when you're starting your autoimmune disease journey, because it relates to the diet and the things that you might know but need to be changed. But it comes back to understanding that your imbalanced immune system really is the meat and bones of this, and that's what we need to focus on. Because once you deal with that, then the thyroid stops getting placed under attack, and then all these different pathways I'm showing you here start to work better. If that makes sense. So anyway, I just wanted to give you a look into this and the program that we have for a lot of women with Hashimoto's that are in Thyroid Revive. But yeah, so if you have any questions about this or about Thyroid Revive or the AP workshop, I mean, feel free to reach out. I'm just here to offer as much value as I can and kind of just give you some new insight. All right, so that's all. Thank you for tuning in and for your attention.